Okay, real talk. How many times a day, and be honest, do you find yourself thinking, ugh, my attention span is trash?
Right.
Like, it's just me. It's like this constant, like, low-level anxiety in the age of TikToks and endless notifications.
Yeah.
So for today's deep dive, you shared an academic essay with me
Yes.
that tackles this very topic. Is our attention span actually eroding
Hmm?
in the digital age, or are we all just being a tad dramatic?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely tapping into a very universal feeling, I think, right? It's like everyone, it's like the new,
Totally.
like, oh, my back hurts. It's like, oh, my attention span. It's like a thing.
Yes.
And while the essay acknowledges that that feeling is super real and very, very widespread,
Right.
it also encourages us to look at the science a bit more closely.
Because sometimes the headlines are a little bit
Of course, of
more
course.
sensational than the actual research.
Totally.
I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've heard that whole, like,
Oh, tell me about it.
we have shorter attention spans than goldfish.
Oh, the infamous goldfish, the goldfish. Yes.
Yeah.
You've got to hand it to that 2015 Microsoft study.
Right.
They knew how to make a splash.
They did.
Even if their methodology wasn't exactly watertight. If you see what I did there.
I do. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So maybe we can lay that one to rest.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that doesn't mean our attention spans are off the hook completely.
Not quite. No, the essay actually highlights some other research, more rigorous research,
Okay.
that does point to a real decline in our ability to focus. One of them that really jumped out at me was by Gloria Mark.
Okay.
And she tracked basically how long
Ugh.
could people stick with a single task before they switch to something else.
Okay. This is where I'm already feeling personally attacked.
Well, brace yourself, because in the early 2000s, the average person could manage about 2.5 minutes
Okay.
on a task. By 2020, that number had plummeted to 37 seconds. You're kidding, 47 seconds. That's barely enough time to, like, decide what to watch on Netflix,
I know.
let alone actually watch something or focus on something.
And that's the problem, isn't it?
Right.
Is that our brains are getting
Right.
so used to this rapid fire, like constantly switching.
Yes.
And it's making it so much harder to engage in the kind of deep, sustained attention that's essential for, well, pretty much everything worthwhile.
Right. And it's interesting because it's not just even the doing, it's the thinking about the thing we could be doing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I should be checking on this.
Yeah.
I could be doing that.
Multitasking myth.
Yes. So not goldfish territory.
No.
But still a pretty dramatic like drop.
Yeah.
So what's causing this? Like, is it really just smartphones or is there something bigger at play here?
So it's definitely more nuanced than just blaming our phones.
Okay.
Although they do play a starring role, the essay kind of breaks down the drivers of attention decline into three main buckets, if you will.
We've got technological distractions,
Oh,
information overload, and
Sure.
then that, ever persistent myth of multitasking.
Okay, let's unpack those.
Yes, let's.
Starting with the elephant in the room, or maybe the smartphone in our pocket is a better analogy.
Right, exactly.
Because it's right there.
It is, and it's not even just about, those tempting little notifications
Right.
popping up every 5 seconds, although
It's a factor.
it is. It definitely is. The essay dives into a 2021 Stanford study that found that frequent phone use can actually rewire our brains.
Wait,
Yeah.
seriously? Rewiring? Like our
Yeah.
brains are physically changing?
That's what the research suggests.
Wow.
All of that swiping and scrolling and app switching, it pushes our brains towards more fragmented thinking.
Oh, interesting.
We're constantly seeking those quick dopamine hits
Right.
from notifications and new content.
Right.
And over time, that makes it much harder to stay engaged in activities that require, more sustained focus.
So it's like our brains are getting a crash course in instant gratification.
Yes,
But nobody signed us up for the long-term consequences.
that's a great way to put it.
Right.
And then on top of the tech itself, there's the issue of information overload. Just think about like how much data
Oh my
you're
goodness.
processing
It's a lot.
every single day.
Yes.
I mean, news feeds, emails, social media,
Social media, podcasts even.
podcasts. It's like
It's a lot.
drinking from a fire hose.
You're telling me. My brain feels like it's running a marathon just trying to keep up with my inbox some days.
And that feeling, that mental exhaustion,
Yes.
is real. It's called cognitive load, and it's a major factor in shrinking attention spans. There was this fascinating 2022 study in Science that found this constant bombardment of information not only makes us more tired, it also really messes with our ability to remember things accurately.
Wow.
We end up skimming instead of really reading, which just reinforces that cycle of shortened attention spans.
Which is so interesting because it's almost like you would think
You'd think?
that we'd be getting better at it, right?
You'd think!
We're doing so much of it.
Hmm.
But it's actually having the opposite effect,
The opposite.
which is wild. And
Yeah.
here I was thinking, I just needed another cup of coffee
Right.
to fix this brain fog. But it sounds like we're talking about a much bigger issue here.
Way bigger.
It's not just my inbox.
No.
It's like a whole...
cultural.
It's cultural, yeah,
Yeah.
of information overload.
Totally. And what's even more, I think, concerning is that instead of hitting pause, we try to like outsmart the system. We're like, okay, I'm just going to multitask my way out of this.
I'll just do it all.
Yes.
Which we both know
Wouldn't work.
how that usually ends up.
Yeah.
Half-written emails, a million tabs open,
Yes.
and the vague feeling that I accomplished absolutely nothing.
Yes.
Been there, done that, got the burnout t-shirt to prove it.
Exactly. And you're not alone. The essay actually calls out the multitasking myth that we all kind of fall for.
Right.
You remember that Stanford study on task switching we were talking about earlier?
Yes.
Well, it turns out those who are like chronic multitaskers, they actually perform worse when they need to focus on a single task.
So all those years of me, like, juggling 5 things at once,
Yeah.
thinking I was so good at it,
Right.
actually made me less productive.
Well, it's not that it made you less productive. It's that our brains just aren't
Yeah.
wired to handle that kind of constant task switching effectively.
Okay.
It's like trying to run,
Right.
multiple programs on your computer at once.
Okay, now that is a technology analogy even I can get behind.
There you go.
Because I was like, my brain's not a computer, but I get it.
Right.
Okay, but this is starting to feel
Yeah.
like a little bleak.
It's a little doom and gloom, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. So we're talking about decreased productivity, increased burnout.
Yeah.
Are there even like broader consequences
Oh,
to this sort of like
yeah.
erosion of attention?
Yeah, totally. And the essay really emphasizes that this goes way beyond just, personal frustration or
Right.
feeling like you can't get stuff done.
Right.
We're talking about a potential crisis in education, a hit to workplace productivity on a larger scale,
Wow.
and some honestly really worrying implications for our collective mental health.
Okay, let's dive into each of those.
Okay.
Starting with education. So
Yeah.
how is this attention crisis kind of, showing up in classrooms?
So it's interesting because, you think about trying to teach
Yeah.
a generation that has grown up on TikTok and instant gratification,
Right.
how to like engage in deep reading or focus on a complex problem for an
Yeah.
extended period of time.
Right.
It's a challenge.
Yes, I can imagine. And I'm guessing there's some research to back this up.
Oh, tons. The essay cites a 2019 study from the American Psychological Association, and get this, students' ability to pay attention in class has dropped by 10% in a decade.
Wow. That's a pretty shocking statistic.
It's huge.
What's driving that decline?
It's not just one thing, but the constant distractions of the digital world
Right.
play a huge role. Teachers are reporting that it is harder than ever to keep students engaged.
Yeah.
They're constantly checking their phones, getting sidetracked by notifications.
It's so true.
It's like their brains are literally wired for distraction.
Yeah, it's true. It's
Yeah.
like we're teaching in high definition
Right.
and their brains are stuck on dial-up.
That's a great way to put it.
Like
Yeah.
they can't receive it.
They can't receive the signal.
They can't.
And the thing is, it's like, okay, that's fine, but the long-term implications of that are kind of concerning.
Right, exactly.
If students can't focus long enough to engage in deep reading, critical thinking, problem solving,
Right.
it's going to impact their ability to like thrive
Right.
in a world that demands those very skills.
Right. It's like we're setting them up for a future where their brains are stuck on fast forward,
Yes.
but the rest of the world
Right.
isn't playing along.
Isn't playing along at all. And this isn't just a problem for like the next generation to solve.
Right.
I mean, the workplace is already feeling the impact of, shrinking attention spans.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about
Let's talk about work.
workplace woes. So we touched on productivity earlier.
Yeah.
But what does this look like on a larger scale?
Think about your own experience.
Right.
Like how many times a day
A lot.
are you interrupted by emails, by notifications, by just that urge to like quickly check social media.
Constantly.
Right. Constantly. And now multiply that
Right.
by an entire workforce.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No, I see where you go with this, and those little distractions add up.
They absolutely do. The essay highlights this Harvard Business Review study
Okay.
that found that employees who are constantly interrupted can take up to 50% longer to complete tasks. And that's not even factoring in the mental toll of constantly having to switch gears
Totally.
and try to regain your focus.
Which, let's be honest, often feels impossible.
It feels impossible because by the time you get back on track,
Totally.
something else pops up.
You're right back, yeah.
Right back in it.
It's exhausting.
It is. And this constant state of attentional juggling.
Right.
It's not just bad for productivity, it's also fueling a mental health crisis.
Right.
Remember that APA survey we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
It also found a really strong link between information overload, digital distractions, and increased levels of stress, anxiety, and even depression.
Which makes total sense.
Total sense.
If you can't ever disconnect,
Yeah.
if your brain is constantly on high alert,
On high alert,
it's going to take a toll.
it's going to take a toll.
So we're talking about a problem that goes way beyond just scrolling through TikTok a little too much.
It's so much bigger.
This is impacting our ability to learn,
Yes.
to work,
Yeah.
and to just function in the world.
It really is. And what's even more, I think, concerning is that our always-on, hyper-connected world is changing the very way we interact with each other.
Totally.
We're spending less time having meaningful conversations,
Right.
more time engaging in kind of superficial
Right.
online interactions.
It's true. Sometimes I feel like I know more about what my online friends ate for breakfast
Yes.
than I do about
Right.
what my actual friends are thinking and feeling.
Yes. 100%.
And that disconnection
Yes.
is definitely taking its toll.
It is.
It's like we're all in this constant state of partial attention.
Right.
Never fully present in one moment.
Right.
Or one conversation.
Yeah.
Which, makes me wonder, is this an everyone problem?
Yeah.
Or are there generational differences at play here? Did our brains on dial-up
Right.
have a better shot at this whole attention thing?
There's definitely something to be said for the way earlier generations
Right, yeah.
experienced the world, right? The essay talks about how boomers and even Gen X, they grew up in an era that was far less digitally saturated.
Right.
Think about it. They had to sit through a whole TV show to see what happened,
Right,
commercials and all. Right. So their brains were wired for a different kind of attention.
Right. No binge watching, no skipping ahead. They had to exercise those attention muscles,
They had to.
whether they wanted to or not.
Right.
Oh.
And reading wasn't just something you squeezed in between, scrolling sessions.
Right.
It was an immersive experience that required, sustained focus.
Totally.
So, yeah, the research suggests that older generations may be more accustomed to what's called, deep work, that ability to really, truly hone in on a single task and block out distractions.
Okay, so that tracks with
Right.
what we've all observed,
Yeah.
in the wild.
Yeah.
But what about those of us who came of age with, a smartphone practically glued to our hands?
Right.
Are we, destined to be the generation of
Right.
scattered brains
Right.
and unfinished to-do lists?
Not necessarily. While it's true that Gen Z has grown up in a world where information comes at them faster than ever, it doesn't mean their brains are incapable of focus.
Right.
Right. Like, remember, attention is a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed.
Okay, that's a much-needed
Right.
dose of
Right.
optimism.
Little glimmer of hope.
Yes. So what's the, training montage for our attention spans look like? Give us the good news. How do we strengthen those, focus muscles?
So the essay highlights a few key strategies.
Right.
Mindfulness practices, for example, have been shown to have a real impact.
Okay.
There was a 2018 study in the journal Nature that found that even just 10 minutes of meditation a day
Wow.
led to significant improvements in attention and focus.
So something as simple as taking a few minutes to, just be present, to, notice our breath, to kind of tune out the noise that can actually make a difference.
It really can. It's about retraining our brains,
Okay.
be more aware of the present moment
Yeah.
rather than constantly getting pulled away.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like hitting the reset button on our attention spans.
Yes,
I love it. But let's be honest, sometimes we need a little more
totally.
than a reset, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we need, a complete system shutdown.
Yes. Sometimes you just gotta unplug,
Yes.
literally and figuratively, to give your brain a break. And it doesn't have to be anything, extreme.
Right.
Even just setting aside like specific times each day where you put your phone away, you resist the urge to check email, and you just like engage in something completely offline can make a world of difference.
It's like giving our brains like a mini vacation
Yes.
from the digital deluge.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And something tells me, like, our nervous systems would thank us for it too.
Oh, 100%.
Right. But this all sounds like a bit like individual responsibility.
Yeah.
Is there anything happening on a larger scale to kind of address this? Like, are schools, workplaces, even governments, like, starting to catch on to the fact that we're in the midst of
Yes.
an attention crisis?
Yes. Thankfully, there is growing awareness about this issue.
Yeah.
The essay points to some like encouraging trends.
Cool.
Companies implementing like no phone policies during meetings.
Okay.
Schools incorporating mindfulness practices into their curriculums.
Love that.
And even governments launching initiatives to promote digital well-being.
Okay, so maybe there's hope for us yet.
There you go.
It's not just about, like, individual willpower.
It takes a village.
It does. It takes a village to raise our attention spans.
Yes.
But it's about creating a culture
Yes.
that values
Totally.
and supports focus and attention,
100%.
which I think is so, so important. So as we kind of emerge from this deep dive into the world of shrinking attention spans,
Right.
what's the one, like, key takeaway you want listeners to kind of walk away with?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, what's the message that can kind of help us navigate this, like, this brave new world of distractions without completely losing our minds?
For me, it's this. We don't have to be victims of this digital age.
Right.
We can reclaim our attention. But it takes awareness, it takes intention, and it takes a willingness to set boundaries.
Yes.
It's about recognizing when technology is serving us versus when it's hijacking our focus.
Right.
And it's about being kind to ourselves.
Yes.
Our brains are adapting to a rapidly changing world, and
Yeah.
we're all just figuring this out as we go.
Beautifully said. And I think that's such a good point. It's not about demonizing technology.
Yeah.
It's about being more mindful to how we
Yes.
interact with it.
100%. And remembering that our attention, our focus, those are the things that make us truly human,
Yeah.
that allow us to connect, to create, to experience the world in all its richness. And those are things worth protecting.
Couldn't agree more. This has been